So I know that there are folks here who have questions from the floor, but I'll just start to show how the Pigeonhole program works. So we'll do that first, and I'll ask the question here that has the most questions so far. There we go. In realistic economic terms, what would happen to the Metro Vancouver economy if the port economy stopped growing? What if it started shrinking as a result of social and political pressures? And there's actually a follow-up question that's quite high up on the list as well, which is what can Port Metro Vancouver and what can we do to improve the communications associated with that economic message? So I think I might start with you on that one, Robin.
Sure. Well, let me just outline a few of the key parameters. As the Chair and I said, around 60,000 jobs in the Lower Mainland are dependent purely on the port supply chain. The activities like people working on the longshore, people involved in operating trains or maintaining port equipment. And those jobs are paying about 50% above the national average wage. So there alone, there is a huge contribution to the Lower Mainland's economy. There are only 2.5 million people in the Lower Mainland. We could assume that quite a lot of them are probably at school or retired. So 60,000 jobs at 50% above the national wage is very significant. If we then think about, on perhaps a more personal basis, the other sorts of jobs and sorts of businesses that are supported by the supply chain activities relating to the gateway, whether it's the retail activities, whether it's importers and exporters, or whether it's so many other businesses where everybody earning a living in the port is spending money. So if the port started to decline instead of grow, we would actually see a significant negative impact on the Lower Mainland's economy. And that would have immediate effects for all of us in terms of where might governments get their tax revenues from for all the services we want. We see increasing demand for services as the population grows, and we need people in work and businesses to be paying the tax to fund those services. So it's a very wide-reaching effect that often isn't realized when sort of just thinking about the port as ships and container terminals and the things that we see. What can we all do? I think it's partly a responsibility of us as the port to help people better understand what positive impact on the economy, the whole system of all of the stakeholders involved in the gateway has. And I think it's everybody involved in that system playing a part in making sure their neighbours understand where they work, what they do, how important it is, and again to address concerns which might be around the environment or the community, which might be one of the reasons that could cause the port to stop growing. I think everybody involved needs to work hard to ensure the great stories that we all have, like the one we just saw about Boundary Bay, are understood more widely.
Great, thank you. So we have a question here from the floor. I'll go at the front there. If you could stand too, that would be great. Thanks so much. Sir.
Roger Emsley from South Delta. I'd like to ask you to explain your concept of sustainability as it relates to building Terminal 2 on the most important and sensitive ecosystem on the whole of the west coast of North America. It is the #1 important bird area in Canada. But I'd also like you to comment on the fact that in building out there, you will be compromising the federal government's wetland protection policy and violating the recently announced National Conservation Plan. And please don't talk to me about mitigation. You cannot mitigate the destruction of the western sandpiper species. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Emsley. So it sounds like there might be two questions there. Perhaps if I could ask Cliff to start and then maybe Duncan.
Excuse me. First, thanks for the question, Roger. One of the things I think is really important to understand is that the proposed Terminal 2 project will be subject to a thorough environmental assessment at the independent panel level. So the sorts of questions that you're asking will be answered by the panel, and it will be the recommendation of the panel to the Minister of Environment that will make the decision as to whether that project can proceed in an environmentally sensitive and appropriate manner.
Okay. So let's go, there was a question here, sir. Oh, ma'am, sorry.
Hello, my name is Jane Ann Kay. I've lived here all my life, and now I have 2 young sons. And this is my question. The chief medical officers are extremely concerned about the health impacts resulting from the proposed direct coal transfer facility project, as are many others. Was an independent health impact assessment done by the Port Authority as was suggested?
Duncan, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Pam. So there are a number of things that are happening as a result of the review of that project. We have received more input, I think, on this particular project than we have on any other project in the time I've been in the port. So we're taking all that input very, very seriously, which is one of the reasons it's taking a long time for us to get through the review process, because we want to be able to answer all of the questions that have been asked. With regard to the health impact assessment, we are requiring a health effects assessment to be done as part of the review of the project. Some of the things that the health authorities are asking for are outside of the scope of our jurisdiction. So it's not that they're not important questions to have answered, but we'll have to sort out how we're going to work our way through that. What we have done, though, is we've retained a third-party reviewer, a national leader in terms of doing health impact assessments. These are folks who've guided the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment, provincial, federal, municipal governments in terms of health impact assessments over years, have tremendous expertise in that area. And they are advising us and our environmental programs team in terms of how best to ensure that health impacts are addressed. When the time comes to issue a project decision on the Fraser Surrey Docks proposal, at that time we will issue a consideration memo that identifies exactly how we've addressed all of the issues that have been raised, including those that have been put forward by the Chief Medical Health Officers for Vancouver Coastal and for Fraser Health.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the other technology here for a moment, and the next question we have is, Port Metro Vancouver guided a $1 billion upgrade on the east-west CN-CP corridor. No similar investment was made on the north-south BNSF corridor, which transports 40% of all freight on the edge of the bay. Why? Is that you, Peter, or Robin?
Well, the Gateway program that's referred to has been an extremely successful partnership between government, railways, the port, and indeed a number of municipalities. It's actually just shy of $1 billion. It's about $750 million that's been invested in the three corridors, the North Shore Trade Area, the South Shore, and the Roberts Bank Rail Corridor. That investment is going to improve the capacity of the port to meet future demand and is going to allow traffic to move around the Lower Mainland much more freely because it's separating at-grade crossings so cars can drive over the train lines, as simple as that. There hasn't so far been enough volume on the north-south line, which is a BNSF line, to require a similar level of investment, but it's something, and the reason Peter and I were looking at each other, it's something that Peter's team spent a lot of time planning and understanding, making sure we know how the traffic flows to the port, both road and rail, are likely to evolve in the future as the demand for trade grows. And so we want to make sure that we're ready to cause the debate that will bring those investments to take place at a time when they're needed, linked to the volumes that are flowing through the port.
Okay, great, thanks.
Pam,
And
if I can just...
sorry,
I was just going to
Peter.
chime in there. I think one of the strengths of the work that's been done by the Gateway and its partners is identifying those opportunities and putting a common voice forward to secure funds for these improvements to occur. So as Robin said, as we start to look forward at where the growth is likely to occur, it becomes it's a strong basis for that analysis and subsequently hopefully securing additional funds for improvements to be made. So while we didn't have our sights focused on that jurisdiction initially, I think that's something that it would logically flow from the projects that we're debating today.
Thanks. So we have a question here at the front.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Annette Horson. I'm just retired as an associate professor at UBC in the Faculty of Medicine, so I now have much more time on my hands. And I've been very interested and happy to hear you talk about your protecting the environment and responding to communities and sustainability. However, I'm very concerned that the health assessment that's been done has had many people, including many experts at UBC and elsewhere abroad, are very concerned about the inadequate health assessments that have been done. There's been nothing about noise pollution. And those of you who are young enough to have children, you should be concerned because this can cause early miscarriages and low birth rate babies, which affects their health lifelong. There's not been an adequate assessment of the particulate matter from coal. And this is a carcinogenic, causes cancer. And we know there's going to be much more of this in the air. I didn't see much of that in the health report.
Okay, can we answer those questions then?
No, I just
okay.
want to...
Okay, so one, just if you could wrap it up, that would be great.
So I'm going to ask, if you're so concerned about sustainability and environmental and health impacts, why are you building another port to take coal down the Fraser up to Texada? I mean, that's not going to be very useful for very long because the world is not going to be allowing coal to be used. So what the hell is it going to be doing? Sorry, I swore.
No,
I will not pause.
That's okay, but I think we got the question. So
Okay.
a couple of things.
One
One
I won't
is...
behave badly. Don't cut me off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was going to answer your question.
Because
Okay.
none of you will listen when you write letters or memos.
So, ma'am,
Okay.
there's been a couple of questions
Okay.
that you've asked, so I'd like to answer those questions.
I'm appalled at the health assessment that's
Okay.
been done.
Thank you.
And you should all know it affects your health, your children's health.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, I think there was a couple of follow-up questions. I know there was more questions about the noise assessment and the particulates, so maybe, Robin, you could answer that, and then I think there's a bigger question about the need for Fraser Surrey docks or the proposal.
Well, let me first just repeat what we said earlier, that the health assessment process is not complete. The proponent, Fraser Surrey Docks, is currently preparing more information in response to questions we've had to them about possible health impacts to make sure we have all the information we need to be able to make a decision with a full understanding of the issues that you raise. So it isn't being built at the moment, the health assessment isn't complete, and we will be considering all of the feedback like yours against all the information we receive from the proponents to make sure the issues are properly considered. In terms of the wider question about why is coal being handled through the port, that isn't a decision that's made by ports. As we saw today south of the border, President Obama, as is the role of federal governments, is making some pronouncements about how he intends to move the US energy production sector to a different form of production and to use less coal. And that is the role of a federal government. So the decision about what gets traded is more the role of a federal government than the role of the port.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go... Sure. So there's a couple more things. I guess there's a request for a little bit more information about the fulsome piece of the health impact assessment. I know there was a question about noise as well, so I don't know if there's anything
Well,
more
again,
that
just to
you could
repeat,
add.
all of the input that we've received about all of the issues that people are concerned about is being considered as part of the process to decide whether or not to issue a permit. So those issues will be considered and we will report out on those within the scope of our jurisdiction when we get to a decision point.
Thank you. Okay. So next question we have is back to the online. So the next one I have here is Port Metro Vancouver projects an increase in Canada-US trade. Freight along this tiny, sensitive north-south BNSF rail corridor has increased 400% over the last 10 years. What's the plan for future increase? I think that's pretty much the same as the one we've already asked. So I'm going to say that one's answered. And the next one is, how does the port plan on dealing with the increasing scarcity of industrial land in Port Metro Vancouver? Can the port play a role in the growth of industrial lands? I think that's a question for Tom.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you heard Robin talk in his remarks this afternoon about an industrial land reserve. So this is something we're advocating for. We're talking about this. We look, I suppose, at the agricultural land reserve, which is very successful. I think all of us would agree, very successful in the province of BC. We've seen, and Robin talked about some of the numbers, I think it's been about 3,000 hectares of industrial land converted to other uses over the past 30 years. And Robin talked about a 10 to 15 year supply of industrial land for this region. So this is something that not just the port is concerned about, but sort of industry around the region is concerned about. So we're advocating for something called an industrial land reserve. It would really be up to the province of BC, like I say, who established the agricultural land reserve, to establish that, something that we're definitely promoting.
Pam, can I just jump in there too? Because
Sure.
I think part of the conversation is around use of existing lands. And so in addition to Tom's comments, I would say one of the things the port is continually an advocate for with regard to lands that are in our control is more dense use of existing sites. And so you see a lot of investment happening in the areas where Robin mentioned the infrastructure has been upgraded, both road and rail. Many terminals investing to take advantage of that and increasing the volume and the economic benefit to the gateway. So both of those things are priorities for us.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I know we've had a question here, someone waiting for quite some time at the end. Sorry, is that not there? I thought you were with a question. Yeah, no, sir, sorry, I thought there was a gentleman there standing. There's actually been a few people who've been waiting for a while. So we'll let you get started and then we'll go over here. Okay. I thought there were people standing here. So there has been one woman here for quite a while. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Paula Williams, and I'm the co-founder of the group Communities in Coal. We represent regular, everyday people who live along the proposed coal route for the Fraser-Surrey Docks coal proposal. Last November, Fraser-Surrey Docks released its environmental assessment regarding the coal proposal, which was quickly criticized on many levels by various parties, including our health authorities, whose job it is to look after the health of the public. The assessment was reviewed and approved by SNC-Lavalin. SNC-Lavalin has a history of corrupt dealings, bribery, and illegal business practices. Knowing this, do you believe SNC-Lavalin to be a reputable, responsible, and credible company capable of reviewing the assessment and any future data collected? Is this the type of company acceptable to the port in assisting in the process of making major economic decisions, keeping in mind your statement that the port's mandate is to facilitate Canada's trade objectives, upholding, and I quote, high standards of review? Should the environmental assessment not be thrown out?
Thank you very much. I think that's... Thank you. Duncan?
Thank you, Pam. In terms of the contents of the report, I'm going to keep my comments limited to that because we're not a party to that agreement. That's an arrangement between the terminal operator and SNC, the company that they've chosen to hire. What I can say is that when we did the initial review of the SNC report, we did find that there were a number of areas that needed additional work, which is precisely why we have gone back to the terminal operator and asked for that additional work to be done. And that's precisely why we have hired an independent third party to advise us in terms of the health, particularly the health impact assessment components of that work. So we felt that at the report that we were provided did fall short of the standard that we would expect, and we wanted additional work to be done. That is being done. That's part of our review. And beyond that, I'm not in a position to offer any comments until we've completed that review and are in a position to review or to issue a decision statement.
Okay. Thank you, Duncan. I know there's another question here, and then we'll go back to Pigeonhole.
I'm Stephen Fairham, and I'm a former teacher in Delta and supporting my community, both North Delta and North Surrey. I want to quickly mention that with what happened with Obama's administration yesterday, you realize that's going to be an incredible increase over time for pressure to bring coal here. So whatever decisions you make are going to be impacted more greatly because of that decision. Therefore, the importance of having a full, complete health impact assessment. It's said that in a just society, the most important thing we value is what happens to our children. Consequently, when I went around to talk to my community regarding this proposal of Fraser-Surrey Docks, it was evident people didn't know about this. Consequently, I was stunned to find out that there were 5 schools within 0.7 of a kilometer of the tracks, and the people didn't know about it. Medical studies in the U.S. have recently determined that people living within 5 kilometers of the coal dust and diesel particulates are under significant health and environmental risks. There are over 100 schools within the area of the train tracks leading up from White Rock up to North Surrey. This includes Surrey, White Rock, Delta, Burnaby, New Westminster, Richmond, Vancouver, and Powell River. Powell River has had no assessment at all. Considering these communities represent over 40% of the population, we believe the families and children of these communities deserve to know the risks before the proposal is approved. This can only be determined by a proper health impact assessment following international standards. That has been done, and it's not being proposed to be done yet. Therefore, anything else is unconscionable. We believe from your statements that Port Metro does have a conscience, and we hope that's to be the case. Will you take this opportunity to announce you are now going to do the right thing and do your best to authorize a full, complete, and transparent health impact assessment on the Fraser Dairy Docks coal handling proposal? It's not too late. There's no time better than now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've pretty much answered most of those questions, but I certainly agree. Is there anyone who has more to comment on that? I think the fact that the assessment is still underway would suggest that that's not quite complete and there's more to be done there.
Could
So I will go back
Could
to...
I just clarify one other thing? You have to mention in terms of the fact that Obama's administration is changing the game as of yesterday. That's going to have
Thank
great
you, sir.
impacts. You must comment on that, please.
Yeah, well,
I would
think-
simply comment that we don't consider those issues as part of an environmental approval and permitting process. What we focus on is the project going to allow the trade to take place in a way that is safe and that preserves the environment, and we sign off under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act that there will be no significant material adverse environmental effects relating to a project. That is what we're mandated to do, and that is absolutely what we will be ensuring through the process we've described.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to a few of the online questions. I know there's a woman here who's been waiting for some time, so if someone with a mic could come over here when they have a chance, that would be great. So my next question is here. How do tanker traffic levels in Burrard Inlet compare to traffic levels in other similar bodies of water? Is that Peter?
I guess the question is, what is a comparable body of water? I can tell you that within a Canadian context, the vast majority of tanker and oil traffic happens on the East Coast by a factor of 5 or 6 times what is currently handled in Burrard Inlet and is proposed even under the current project that's under review. With regard to that particular project, obviously we're going through a review process led by the National Energy Board, and I don't know if there's any other comments on that. We can comment later.
You didn't answer the question as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So
Right.
you said that
Ma'am.
in similar the East Coast, but it is
Ma'am.
several ports or one?
Excuse me, ma'am, we're going to go through, there's a number of people and you've already asked a question, so I think...
Yeah, but he didn't answer the question.
So, have you...
Well,
so-
if you want to look at, for example,
Okay.
if you want to look at, for example, the Straits of Gibraltar, or the area around Singapore, or the area around Rotterdam, you'll find that the amount of tanker traffic is 1 or 2 orders of magnitude, 10 to 100 times more than will be the case even if the Kinder Morgan pipeline is expanded. So it really does depend on what context you want to look at things through.
Okay, great. So I'm going to do one more here, and then we'll go to the floor again. So the next highest question is, given the port's evident environmental leadership, why is there such a skewed perception of priorities and values? How can we better share our environmental leadership with the world?
Well, there are a number of things. Obviously, when you're doing the environmental work, you're trying to actually improve things, and you're not out there broadcasting it so much. But one of the things that we've recognized through our community awareness campaign is the interest in the public for understanding that trade is happening responsibly. We've heard time and time again from communities that they support overwhelmingly the trade to the port. They just want to know that we're managing it in an environmentally responsible manner. So we have built that into the community awareness campaign. You saw today on the Port Talk TV episode that aired. We are going to profile a number of the environmental initiatives that the port has underway through that medium. It's the challenge is there are a lot of people to communicate to, and it's not an easy task to get the word out. But we are doing what we can, and I think through the community awareness campaign over the next 3 years, we should see the level of awareness rise in terms of that role.
I think we have a question down here at the front.
My name is Kate Gordanier-Smith. I live in the Big Bend area in Burnaby where we were threatened by flood in 2011, and all these little white signs appeared next to our ditches so we wouldn't rush out in fear and drown in the ditches. My question is very short, but there are 3 contexts I need the port authorities to understand in order for you to answer it. So I ask you, I cannot, my question will not even take 30 seconds, but the context is important, and there's no way I can do that in 1 minute. This is complex, this is complicated. So
Ma'am?
I'll begin.
Ma'am, may I suggest, is it a long written statement?
No.
Okay.
I
So
want it-
if you could
okay.
keep it as brief as you can, that would
All
be
right.
great.
Given internationally that NASA says, and I'm quoting, 97% of climate scientists agree that climate warming trends over the past century are very likely due to human activities leading to sea level rise. The International Monetary Fund considers climate change to be a greater economic threat than global economic stability. The International Energy Agency, of which Canada is a member, warns that passing 2 degrees of centigrade in average global temperature will have dire consequences. The World Bank declared that mitigating climate change is urgent. All countries, including Canada, pledged at Copenhagen 2009 to avoid a 2 degrees Celsius rise. And Obama, as was mentioned, just committed the USA to cut carbon emissions. Okay, that's internationally. Nationally, Canada's Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy estimated in 2011, before it was disbanded, that climate change could cost our country, and this is important because we're talking about what the port generates for us as a community, as a nation. Climate change could cost our country between $21 and $48 billion per year by 2050. The Insurance Bureau of Canada in the last 4 years nationally averaged almost $1 billion in terms of claims for natural catastrophes. In Alberta, just Alberta alone was $1.7 billion for the flood last year, and it's still rising. And given that regionally, the BC Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources Operations in their 2012 final report on dike remediation, which concerns me and my family completely, estimate the cost of adaptation to sea level rise in BC by 2100 to be $9.47 billion, that a 1 meter rise would inundate more than 4,600 hectares of farmland and 15,000 hectares of industrial and urban areas. And I'm listening to you say, sir, that we need our industrial areas.
Ma'am, may I just interrupt
I'm
for 1
almost
second?
done, ma'am.
Okay.
And BC's Green Communities Amendment to Bill 27-2008 Local Government Act requires all local and regional governments to include climate change targets. In Washington and Oregon, both state governors asked their federal government to examine the consequences on global air quality in building their new ports, and the review process for the proposal to ship coal from Longview, Washington, includes investigation of global warming effects as well as statewide whale effects. So that's the context.
Okay.
My question is, please show me online, here and now, in port documents, how it was determined that shipping U.S. coal through our port is in the best interest of the Canadian public.
Thank you very much.
Well, to repeat an answer we've already given, the policies you describe are federal government policies, and the restrictions or otherwise on cargoes that are shipped are federal government policies. Our role is to ensure that cargoes that can be shipped legally, such as coal, can be shipped in a way that do not impact the environment while they're shipped. That's our role.
Ma'am.
No, I'm sorry.
Ma'am, we have many other people.
Last year, this is not in the court's mandate, and there comes a point when the argument that we're only obeying orders is simply unacceptable, sir. Actions have consequences, and if these actions cause damage and lives, then each person is individually responsible. So I'm asking, what will it take for the Port Authority to take responsibility, include the global environment in its bottom line?
A change in the federal regulations.
So I think I appreciate that there is a concern around the answer that's been given, but that is the answer. And so what I'd like to do is move on. There are a number of other folks here who have questions about other aspects, so I'm just going to ask that we deal with some of those. And I'm sure that there are folks who would be happy to talk to you further when we move to the less formal portion of today's event. I think we have a question here from someone who's been waiting for some time. And I would ask, is it about something other than the coal and the health impact assessment?
No.
Okay. So perhaps if I could, very short, I'm not sure there's more answers that can be given, but I would like to give you a chance to ask your question briefly. Absolutely, and that's why I'm actually going to give her the question, and then we'll move on. Thank you for waiting, ma'am.
You're welcome. My name is Tatiana Easton. I was born in Vancouver many years ago, and I'm not sure that it's a better city now. All the talk is about growth, growth, growth. More industry, more jobs. What could be the downside? Unlimited growth increases the divide between rich and poor, between health and disease. Other people have talked about how we should closely monitor, the air pollution as a result of contamination by coal trains and other things. I don't want to repeat what other people have said, but I would like you to say, please have a proper health assessment before you even think about expanding the Surrey docks. I would like to see the coal train stopped. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've got two more questions that I'm going to do through the online, and then I know there's a gentleman who's been waiting patiently right beside you there. Okay, so the next question I have is, can the port take a stronger role in advocating stronger transportation networks, including highway systems, across Metro Vancouver so that goods more efficiently move across the Lower Mainland? Peter?
I mean, I guess I'll start off. The port has, through the initiatives that Robin mentioned, played a significant leadership role with both the federal and provincial government against the backdrop of the growth that we anticipate in the gateway. That's always the conundrum for us, is looking forward to the business that Canada hopes to do, what that will manifest itself in terms of improvements that are necessary to handle those goods efficiently, and then working with local stakeholders, whether they be provincial, federal, or regional in the case of TransLink and other agencies. So we anticipate continuing to do that. I'd say the good news is we have a strong basis for doing that because of what we anticipate coming forward to our regional economy in the future.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Next one I have is, what about the inherent mandate conflict between being a public regulator responsible for transparency and protecting health and the environment, and then promoting trade and industrial growth? So about that dichotomy, perhaps Duncan, you can answer?
I think it's important to understand too that we've been having this conversation. It's a very live conversation in the port right now because obviously we've got this dual role. But we have been specifically designed under the Canada Marine Act to have responsibility and accountability for making decisions about the activities that happen in the port. So it's that dual role it can be a challenge, but keep in mind, like a lot of the projects that we're talking about, as much as we are, for Fraser Surrey Docks or any other projects happening in the port, we have our own standard for environmental assessment or review. These are all projects, if we're leading the review, that fall underneath that federal environmental assessment threshold. So that's the ambit in which we're working, but we've been designed to be this way. So it can be a very challenging role, to be candid, a very challenging role. But we have been specifically designed in order to be nimble, to be able to support Canada's trade priorities, and to make sure that we do that in a way that minimizes and addresses impacts on the environment.
Thank you. I know there's time for one more question down here, and then we'll ask a few more, and then we will wrap up. Yeah, right here.
Involvement. I was very saddened to hear nobody talked about community health, which is one of the main issues with the coal industry. Now, I understand you're having a third-party, independent health assessment again, and I would like to know, is a health authority included in this one? And why were they not included in the original study, since it is about health? And do you plan on having full public hearings on every step of the process so people can have input along the entire process instead of saying, okay, we had community involvement and this is what we're going to do?
Great, thank you.
The health authorities have provided us, we have met with the health authorities in reviewing this project. They have also provided us very detailed feedback on where they see there needs to be addressed as part of the review. Those comments are being taken into consideration as part of our review. And when that review is complete, we will be reporting out publicly and clearly identifying how we have addressed or can't address, if we can't address, every single item that they have raised. So they have been engaged. Since the end of the public comment period, we've been doing the work of doing the review. And when we're in a place to make a decision, we will publicly identify exactly how we've addressed all the issues that have been raised by the health authorities.
Will there be public input at that time?
We had a lengthy public input period that's now closed. So now it's time for us to review the material. We've had over 4,000 submissions on this project. So I doubt there's any new information that's going to be coming forward at this late date. We're going to complete the review and we'll hopefully be in a position to make a decision in the coming weeks and months.
So I have a few more that are not related to the health impact assessment that have come up, and they've got quite a number of votes, so I'd like to ask those ones now. The next one we have is, what is Port Metro Vancouver's reaction to the federal government's recent strengthening of tanker traffic safety rules?
Maybe I'll answer that. Certainly, the report that was released some months ago, the port endorsed 45 recommendations that were made. We provided some comment on that, and then most recently, the Minister of Transport Rate announced the implementation process around that. So we certainly look forward to working with all the industry stakeholders, led by Transport Canada, to implement that world-class tanker safety system. Many of the things are things that are in place on the West Coast already and are likely to be refined and enhanced. But it's strengthening what we see as an already very strong system.
Thank you. Next one we have is, as with truckers and disruption at container terminals, the IWLU has passed a strike vote against C-SPAN. How is Port Metro Vancouver involved to prevent severe port disruption? So I guess not everyone is on their Twitter feed.
Well, clearly we're not at the table in those negotiations because they are negotiations between a union and the union's employment group. What I understand is that the Minister of Labour is in town meeting with the various parties as we speak, and my understanding is that she has been making some progress in terms of moving that process towards negotiation rather than disruption, which we're very pleased to hear.
And then I have one more that is a different topic, which I would like to ask. How does tourism factor into Port Metro Vancouver's 2050 plan?
Well, tourism is another big part of the local economy that I probably should have mentioned previously when I was talking about the economic impacts of the port. We see it this time of year with the cruise ships that are coming in and out of our harbour. It's one of the most sort of symbolic elements, perhaps, of the port for many people. Each cruise ship that comes here, because it's home porting, so passengers are getting on and off, delivers about $2 million to the local economy. 800,000 passengers come through Vancouver because of the cruise industry. And in fact, about 1 in 4 cross-border flights at the airport through summer is a cruise passenger. So we see tourism and the cruise element of tourism as a very important part of the local economy, something we're very focused on making sure we can continue to support and grow as part of the port's mandate.
Great. So we are at 4:30, which is a little bit longer than we had intended, and also longer given that we started a little bit late. So what I am going to do is wrap up this portion of today's event. I know there are some folks in the audience who still would like to ask their question. I want to assure you that everyone here at the stage here with me is available for questions afterwards during the informal portion. And as I already mentioned, any question that, excuse me. Yeah. So let me just make sure that I make myself clear. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So, I would just like to answer the... Okay, so what I'd like to do is just be clear about what is happening afterwards. So all of the questions that are being asked today, whether they're answered, if they haven't been answered here, they will have a response on Port Talk within the next couple of days. So any question that didn't get answered today, by all means, you will be able to get an answer. However, Sir, absolutely we would have...
Because this was nonsense.
Okay.
It was nonsense. No, it was. Set it up. Why should we sit here? Come on.
So, Okay. Sir, very happy to have someone answer your question. So,
You all know it. That's why we came here. You know it. You had yourselves ready to answer those
thank you.
questions.
Sir, what we'll do is make sure that someone is able to answer your question. And I think that the folks who are here who posed their questions using this format would want to make sure that their questions got answered as well. So I would just ask the folks who are here, let's make sure that we have an opportunity to answer those questions one-to-one. So,
Votes for the questions. Is that transparent? Can I see the number of votes for the questions?
okay. The ones that rise to the top are the most voted questions. So what I would like to do now is, this completes the formal agenda for today's portion of the event. On behalf of Port Metro Vancouver, I would like to thank everyone for your participation. I understand there are some folks who definitely would like to have more questions answered, and as I mentioned, we'll make sure that we have time to do that. If you'd like to stay behind, we can certainly arrange to have that answers to all of your questions. We invite everyone to, if you have anything, okay. Thanks. Ma'am.
Not mad at you. You got set up.
Okay. I think I've already mentioned that folks are willing to stay. So by all means, those of you who would like to join us in the other room for refreshments, happy to do so. And as I mentioned, we'll have folks here able to answer your questions. Thanks very much for attending. We're adjourned.